Daniel Mercer had spent most of his life handling things that went bad slowly. Not dramatically, not all at once. That was the trick with food. It didn't collapse in some grand theatrical way. It softened, bruised, sweetened too far, molded at the edges where nobody thought to check. And Daniel knew how to see it coming. At 52, he managed produce in a mid-sized grocery store, the kind with fluorescent lights that made every apple look shinier than it really was. He wasn't important, not in the loud way. He didn't run the company, didn't wear a tie, didn't give speeches, but he knew which pallet needed rotating before it spoiled, which lettuce would turn by morning, which shipment had been stacked badly and would cost them $200 in waste if nobody fixed it before close. So he fixed it, quietly. Old stock forward, new stock back, bruises removed before they spread, waste reduced before anyone else even noticed it had started. Nobody thanked him much. That was fine. Daniel wasn't built for applause. After work, he'd go home, microwave leftovers, sit in the dark with a controller in his hands, and play survival games to unwind. One in particular had always pulled him in. The coast, the hunger, the low-level panic of trying to make too little last just long enough. He didn't play it like everyone else. He didn't sprint for guns. He didn't chase kills. He built little loops. Fish here, water there, a hidden stash, a route that made sense. He played to last. Then, one night on the drive home, a storm rolled in hard enough to make the sky look bruised. By the time Daniel got inside, the rain was slamming the windows. The power flickered once, then again. He lit a candle, sat on the couch, thought absently about checking the apples first thing in the morning. Then the lightning hit. Not nearby, not outside. It felt like it hit through the room itself. White light. Pressure, a sound too large to understand, and then cold, deep, biting, salt-soaked cold. Daniel woke coughing seawater onto black stone. He rolled onto his side, gasping, hands scraping against rock slick with spray. Waves hissed behind him, retreating and returning with the calm indifference of something that had never cared whether men lived or died. He stayed there for a moment, inventorying, hands shaking but functional, legs numb but moving, head pounding but attached. Good enough. When he finally looked up, he saw a gray shoreline under a gray sky, rocky coast, salt air, no road, no buildings, no power lines, and hunger. Not the familiar kind, not the "I missed lunch" kind. This was immediate, sharp, wrong in its urgency. He checked his pockets, wallet, keys, dead phone with a cracked screen. No answers, just footprints in the wet sand leading away from where he'd washed ashore. Fresh ones. Daniel stared at them for a long moment. Then he did what he always did when something went wrong. He stopped. He breathed. He took inventory. Shelter, heat, water, food, time. Time was already leaving. He didn't run inland, didn't call for help, didn't panic just because panic would have felt appropriate. He walked the shoreline instead. That was how he found the fish. A gull had been pecking at it near the rocks, a small silver thing half-stranded by the tide. Daniel picked it up and held it in his palm. Real weight, real flesh, real food. He crouched in the wind and looked at it like a man studying the last useful thing in a room. Food didn't care where you were. It only cared how you treated it. He found driftwood, a shard of glass half buried in the sand, a small hollow between rocks where the wind was weaker. He built a fire the hard way, failing twice before he got it right. He warmed the fish on a flat stone and forced himself to eat slowly, even while his body screamed at him to tear through it. That was the first rule. Not a spoken rule, an invisible one. If you spent everything today, tomorrow arrived carrying a knife. By nightfall, he'd found a trickle of fresh water farther inland and a shallow overhang in the hillside that could pass for shelter if he kept his standards low and his expectations lower. And just as he settled in, he heard footsteps. A younger man stumbled through the trees, wet, shaking, eyes wide with the kind of panic that made people move too fast and think too little. "Tell me you're real," the man blurted. Daniel studied him for a beat. Empty hands, raw palms, starving. "I'm real," Daniel said. The younger man's name was Tyler Reed. He'd woken up on the beach too. He'd run inland because that was what he thought you were supposed to do. In his mind, this still had the shape of a game. Get off the coast, move fast, loot hard, don't think too long. Daniel gave him a scrap of fish, and then watched him eat it too quickly. A few minutes later, Tyler hunched over, clutching his stomach. "You said eat slowly," he gasped. "I did," Daniel said. That was the second lesson. Knowing and doing were not the same thing. The next few days taught the rest. Daniel took Tyler to water and made him rinse his hands before drinking. He showed him how to move slower over bad ground, how to watch where wind pooled and where it broke, how to look at a tide pool not as a lucky find, but as part of a cycle. They caught fish together in shallow rock basins left behind by the tide. Tyler splashed and cursed and failed twice before he got one cleanly. Daniel left fish behind even when they were hungry. "Why not take all of them?" Tyler asked. "Because the easiest way to make tomorrow harder," Daniel said, "is to treat today like it's the only day." That was the shape of everything Daniel did. He didn't build a base, he built a loop. Water here, shelter there. A hidden place to cook. A marker made of stones only he would notice. A route that made sense when tired men stopped thinking clearly. He found a ruined shed inland because he wasn't looking for a shed. He was looking for mistakes. Straight lines where nature didn't make them. Places too ugly for desperate people to bother with. Inside, he found cloth, wire, a cracked plastic crate, and a small folding knife stiff with rust. Tyler looked at the haul like it was treasure. Daniel looked at it like it was infrastructure. That was the difference between them. For Tyler, every useful thing still felt like a lucky break. For Daniel, useful things were just parts waiting to be arranged. Then came the first real loss. They stored fish and shellfish in a cool, shaded hollow, wrapped carefully, tucked away properly. The next day, Daniel opened the bundle and knew immediately it had gone wrong. Not rotten, not yet, but wrong. Too soft, too warm in the smell. Tyler stared at it in disbelief. "We did everything right." Daniel shook his head. "We did most things right." They buried it, didn't eat it, didn't argue with reality, didn't pretend effort changed spoilage. That was another invisible rule. The world did not care how hard you had tried, only whether the system held. As hunger pressed in, they adapted. Bitter greens, small forage, better routes, less wasted motion. And that was when Daniel began noticing the others. First, there was Marcus, tall, armed, confident in the way men are when early success convinces them they've understood the world. Tyler had seen him first on the beach, taking food from someone weaker, shouting, moving like ownership was just a form of courage. Later, Daniel saw him for himself at the water source. Marcus didn't rinse his hands before drinking, didn't move carefully, didn't hide his fire. He had a rifle, followers, and the kind of charisma that feeds on short-term results. He was exactly the kind of man people mistake for a leader at the beginning of a collapse. He took quickly, hoarded visibly, burned through trust like kindling. Tyler was afraid of him. Daniel wasn't. Not because Marcus wasn't dangerous, he was. But Daniel had seen this kind of logic before, in back rooms, warehouses, and badly managed shipments. The same thinking every time. Take everything now, sort it out later. Assume later belongs to you. Marcus wasn't building survival. He was borrowing against a future he didn't understand. Then there was Rob, older, thin, bitter in a way that had probably once been caution before life sharpened it into distrust. Rob didn't like Daniel's methods at first, didn't trust any system he couldn't see enforced. He had the look of a man who had watched too many good intentions rot into nonsense. "You staying on the coast?" Rob asked him once. "For now," Daniel said. "Bad idea," Rob muttered. Daniel understood him immediately. Rob wasn't wrong, exactly. The coast was being stripped by frightened newcomers and armed opportunists. But Rob assumed all systems failed the same way, loudly, suddenly, and for everyone at once. Daniel knew better. Systems usually failed quietly first. Then there was Elias, young, silent, watchful. Elias rarely spoke, but Daniel saw him noticing things. The way stones had been rearranged, the way food disappeared in small amounts instead of all at once, the way paths curved instead of cutting straight. He didn't ask questions, he copied behavior. Daniel respected that. You didn't need everyone to understand the philosophy, you just needed enough of them to repeat the right actions. And eventually, Daniel discovered something that changed the whole story. The coast was not resetting. Loot didn't come back. Food didn't magically reappear because time had passed. Towns and shoreline pockets were being stripped permanently by newcomers who arrived hungry, panicked, and convinced they could outrun scarcity.
That was the midpoint, the real one. Not a gunshot, not a battle. A realization. This place had supply chains, and those supply chains were failing. So Daniel committed, not to heroics, not to saving people, to infrastructure. He and Tyler moved inland just enough to stop drifting. They abandoned the obvious wind pocket by the shore because anything that worked too well eventually attracted attention. They split caches apart, moved food in smaller quantities, protected the water source by keeping it forgettable. They made the loop harder to see and easier to repeat. And that was when Marcus accidentally helped them. He got loud, built fires near the road, gathered men around him, declared the coast still rich if you were willing to take what others hid. He noticed stone markers, found one or two of Daniel's old signs, took this as proof there were stashes nearby. Daniel watched him from cover one afternoon, standing in a clearing near the coast, rifle slung across his chest, while two men hovered nearby, eager and stupid with hunger. "If it's hidden," one of them said, "it's not defended." Marcus laughed. Daniel listened and understood the solution instantly. Don't defend it, erase it. That afternoon, he and Tyler dismantled everything obvious, moved caches, downgraded the appearance of abundance, left behind fish heads, picked over pools, signs that suggested someone desperate had already made a mess of the place. He made the coast lie, not empty, that would invite investigation, just thin enough to feel not worth the trouble. That was the turn. Marcus kept chasing visible gain. Daniel shifted toward invisible continuity. And slowly, the system began to spread. Tyler stopped rushing, started rinsing his hands before drinking without being told, learned that carrying too much made you slower and greedier, learned that not enough could still be enough if it was positioned properly. Rob began watching Daniel with something almost like respect, though he'd never have called it that. "You're the first man I've seen unbuild on purpose," Rob said once. Daniel took that as a compliment. And Elias. Elias started leaving signs, not copies, echoes, a cloth strip tied low between roots where only careful feet would see it, stones arranged subtly near a sheltered patch, a cache replaced without comment, no speeches, no loyalty pledges, just behavior. That was when Daniel knew the thing had become real, because it no longer depended on him being present. Weeks passed, then months. The coast changed, not dramatically. That was the whole point. It wasn't rebuilt, it wasn't safe. There were still desperate men, still armed takers, still cold waves and long, hungry days, and fires that burned too bright in the wrong hands. Marcus didn't become a villain in the storybook sense. He didn't get a final showdown. He didn't die under lightning with some moral attached. He just became less important. His methods decayed around him. Food spoiled in bulk. Men stopped trusting him. Easy places stopped yielding easy returns. He had more weapons than meals and more noise than options. The coast stopped rewarding his kind of intelligence. And as that happened, Daniel's network kept deepening. Small hidden gardens appeared in tree lines. Smoked fish caches were tucked beneath stones and brush. Water routes remained usable because people had learned not to foul them. Harvest spots rotated. Nobody claimed ownership. Nobody announced rules, but everyone who lasted long enough began to follow them. Eat slowly. Replace what you take. Don't strip tomorrow to survive tonight.
Keep the system invisible enough that it outlives your ego. That was Daniel's real gift. Not survival, transferable restraint. By the time the final season turned, the coast looked different. Still bleak, still dangerous, still half-starved in appearance, but fed. Fed in the way old forests are alive, not because of one thing, but because many quiet things keep happening correctly. One evening, Daniel stood above the shoreline and watched a newcomer stumble out of the surf. Young man, panicked, shaking, freshly dragged into this world the same way Tyler had been. The newcomer staggered, searching wildly, still carrying all the terrible energy of a person who thought speed was a strategy. Daniel didn't step out, didn't introduce himself, didn't explain the philosophy, didn't make himself a leader. He walked down after the boy had moved on and left a small bundle tucked into the lee of a rock. Preserved fruit, enough to slow the panic, and a note. Simple, plain. The kind of sentence Daniel would have trusted even back in the store. Eat slowly, replace what you take. That was all. Then he turned and walked inland, alone. He didn't need the coast to know his name, didn't need anyone calling him founder or savior or anything equally stupid. Behind him, hidden in tree lines and stone breaks and half-forgotten paths, the system continued. Tyler would keep parts of it. Elias would keep parts of it. Even Rob, grumbling all the while, would keep parts of it. The coast no longer depended on Daniel Mercer. That was how he knew he'd done it right. Because if you can't keep it going, you don't really have it. And for the first time since the lightning storm had thrown him out of one world and into another, Daniel allowed himself a small, private certainty. The coast would not starve.